Hola, mi gente. Welcome to La Vida es una podcast, a space where we have authentic and honest conversations about life experiences. We are your hosts, Itzel and Dante.
And today we're going to talk about the societal pressure to have kids, aka baby pressure. Let's start off by defining what is baby pressure, or in Spanish, cuando nos preguntan, ¿y los hijos para cuándo?
So, baby pressure refers to the common belief that after getting married, a couple should start planning to have kids. This is often a belief that is held by our parents or family members. One of the reasons why I wanted to talk about this topic is I remember maybe like 4 years into dating Dante, my mom asked when I was planning to have kids or when we were going to get married. It always starts like that. It starts with, okay, well, when are you getting married? That's the first pressure to get married. And then soon after you get married, like the question comes pretty quickly around when are you going to have kids? And I think over time, our parents have learned, at least my mom has definitely learned, that I'm going at my own pace. And of course, she still brings it up, but she's now more aware that we want to wait to have kids and understands that a little better than she used to maybe a couple years ago.
Yeah, one thing with these questions, like when are you going to get married? ¿Cuándo te vas a casar? When are you going to have kids? ¿Cuándo van a tener hijos? It's important to note that it's adding expectations, right, to a couple. There's so much more to us than just, being a couple.
Yeah.
Like we have our careers, we have our personal goals, nuestras metas personales. So there's more to just wanting to have kids and getting married. We also are prioritizing our health, right? That's another piece that's important.
I do feel some compassion for our parents though, because they grew up in different times. In those times, it was very common to get married pretty young.
Right.
And then start having kids. My grandma had 6 kids. As a woman, I definitely feel the weight of that question a lot more. Sometimes I do get a little bit upset when people keep on asking me these questions. I think it's visible when my mom constantly asks when we're going to have kids or to hurry up because I'm getting older or you're almost 30. Or don't have kids too late because, there's a lot of health concerns. And of course, I understand that. Like, I'm aware that there are health concerns the later in life you have kids.
Yeah, and we're taking that into consideration
We are.
Right? The question comes like assuming that we're not.
There's a lot of things we have to consider. And I think sometimes our parents and other folks, it's not just our parents,
Right.
They don't consider. It's not top of mind that we do want to do other things, that we don't want to have kids right away. Like I told you, after we got married, one of the things I wanted to do was just enjoy being married.
Right.
Just enjoy our relationship a couple more years, travel, have time to do other things. And also, it's so funny that they always ask us when we're going to have kids, when there's such a strong narrative sometimes around how parents have no time for themselves and how difficult it is to raise a kid,
Yeah.
It's like 2 conflicting narratives that we are getting from society.
It's a big life change, right? A lot of people say, hey, once they have kids, it's hard to have a regular sleeping pattern. There is so much around this topic and this decision that I really think it's up to the couple to decide.
Another idea that I recently came across was I was watching Love is Blind, and they kept on pushing the baby narrative because it's about, couples dating while not seeing each other. And at the end, they get married if they decide to do so. And then they have a reunion. And at that reunion, one of the hosts of the reunion, she was pushing like the question of, so when are we going to have the first Love is Blind baby? And it just came up a couple of times throughout the entire reunion. And there was just this very strong narrative around, well, you're married. When are you going to have a kid? And as I was reading through like the Instagram comments, somebody mentioned, why do we need to have kids in order for a marriage to be complete? And I thought that was such a shock to me because I've never thought about it in that way. That's an idea that's being generated in the back of our mind when people ask us that. It was just such a different point of view to me that I definitely remembered thinking like, wow, that's true. Is our marriage not good enough or complete or sufficient if we don't have kids? But it shouldn't. Of course it's complete.
Yeah, and I think what comes to mind to me is for capitalism to work, I would say, the family unit, right? You need constant workers. You need people to continue to be part of the system, right? So from society standpoint, it is beneficial
Mm.
for these corporations and institutions that there is
More kids,
more
more
kids
people.
along the way so that they'll be part of the system.
That makes sense.
That is, for us, at least something we consider, right?
Mm.
We want the best for our kid. In the future, if we were to decide to have a kid, thinking about the implications, right?
Yeah.
We're going to raise our kids. At the end of the day, will they continue to be part of the system and just having to work, having to
Mm.
contribute to these institutions,
Yeah.
dealing with like the
Mhm.
mental and physical stress,
Mhm.
right, of being part of corporate America or being part of these organizations of working all the time?
Yeah.
Is that something that we want to do, that we want to contribute to the system, or is there an alternative, a different way to that?
Mm.
So that's when you mentioned that
Yeah.
the societal pressure to have
Mhm.
kids, that's another reason I think why it's an idea that has been normalized. People think like a couple, two people being together is not enough. They want kids because it benefits the system overall. I think
Mhm.
also, some people nowadays, a lot of people have pets,
Yeah.
right? Why are pets not enough, right? They're also a big responsibility, right?
Mhm.
Financially, from a time standpoint, emotional, right, as
Mhm.
well. There is a lot of pressure put on by society to have kids. I think during the pandemic, we saw a shift. Data actually shows, there was a study, I think in 2021 from the Pew Research Center, that's actually shows that more adults today, 18 to 49, I believe was the age range, are deciding to not have kids. And this is something, a trend that has continued to occur over the last few years. I think over the last 5 years, less and less adults in the US are deciding to have kids. And they quote from environmental factors like climate change and global warming to even more medical factors and many other factors as well. The trend is that less people, less adults are wanting to have kids nowadays.
From the point of view of capitalism, it makes a lot of sense to want to continue to produce workers, right?
Mhm.
Like you said. That is so interesting. So that is why this concept of you should have kids right after you get married is so normalized and so common in our families. I wonder though if this is across like all cultures, because I know
Mm.
that in our cultura it's something that girls deal with a lot quite often, moms, family members, pretty much everyone that comes over to your get-togethers will ask you when you're having kids, if you're dating anybody. Just there's this pressure to get married, to have kids, to produce, to give people grandbabies, and it can be really heavy on some people.
Yeah, you see this everywhere on the movies, on telenovelas, which maybe that's where our parents and grandparents are getting that idea reinforced
Yeah.
that they're watching, every night. Yeah, that's something that gets pushed around and passed down through generations. And like you said, it's putting a lot of pressure on the couple when they may be dealing with many other things.
I do want to get your perspective because I'm talking a lot from my perspective as a woman in this world, in our cultura, right? So I do wonder if you feel the same pressure, but I wanted to share a quick story. My mom was a young mom. She got married at 17. She had her first child at 19, and then she had me at 21 years old. So growing up, she always warned me about the dangers of getting pregnant too young. She didn't want me to repeat the same mistakes that she did. From as like early as I can remember, she would just warn me, don't get pregnant. And that was just very much ingrained in my mind that I don't want kids.
Mm.
Come like my early 20s, we started dating. Like maybe at age 24, she started asking me when we're going to have kids and to not take too long to have kids. And that you don't want to be too old when you have kids, because she would put it this way, like let's say you have a kid at 30 years old. When they're 20 years old, you're going to be 50. So she would put it in terms of you're going to be old when they're like in their early 20s. Let's say you wait to have kids until you're 40. When they're 10 years old, you're going to be 50. So that is like maybe like a scare element of you want to be young, a young parent, or still be young enough to grow your child and to see them active and be active with them. I don't even know what to call this, but like you grow up with this idea and this concept of like, don't have kids, be very careful, do not get pregnant.
Right.
And then when you're like early 20s, it completely shifts to like, when are you going to have kids?
Right.
So it's just like, what do you want from me? You know?
It's night and day. It's like the flip of a switch. First, like off, don't have any kids. And then as soon as you start dating, and you're becoming an adult, it's like, hey, when are you gonna have
When are you
kids?
gonna have kids?
Right?
It's so funny because it's like the same thing with our families don't want us to go away to move out of the house. And then when you're like early 20s, it's like, when are you gonna move out?
Right. It's one of those topics that it's kind of like day and night, two polar opposites, and it's contradicting. So you had asked about my perspective. So the perspective for me is, I grew up with two sisters in a Mexican household. And I think the baby pressure is mostly pushed on to women in a relationship, and more frequently by your parents than it is to men in a relationship. And I know that's not the case for everyone, but that's kind of what has been my own experience. My mom would sometimes say, "Hey, y para cuándo los nietos? Like, when are you gonna give me grandchildren,
Yeah.
right?" And so, and maybe she would say it jokingly, right? But I know that's something that she really wants. I think it's beautiful to have kids and to create life. I think no doubt with that. I think that's beautiful. But I think it's also a very personal decision that the couple needs to make. And so for me, I would say that the pressure, you have felt it a bit more when we kind of chat about it. And there's this concept of a timeline as well. Like by a certain age, you want to have kids, else there might be risk involved. There might be some health implications. That is something that I do think about a lot more now and consider. But I think those questions and that pressure, I've heard my mom maybe ask it more to my sisters than to me. And so I do think it's in a way a responsibility that society places more on women than on men.
Talking about the timeline, just for reference, Dante's 28 and I'm 27. This timeline that society and I guess medicine and family members have said has definitely given me a lot of time anxiety. It was so intense in my early 20s and it's gotten better over time. Like I would wake up feeling like I was running out of time. I would be so anxious if I wasted like a minute of my time because I was like, I'm running out of life. And I know that's a little extreme, but it definitely did feel terrible. And I found ways to cope with it, and I don't feel that as much nowadays. But when the topic of kids come up, I definitely feel like, damn, I'm getting close to that timeline. I need to live my best life in these like 2 to 3 years because after that, it's no longer my life anymore.
Yeah, one thing I do want to clarify though is I think the expectation is more frequently placed on women, but I do think, at least for me, I do feel pressure because I think becoming a parent is a full-time role, right? And it's something that there's no textbook or college classes you can take on becoming a good parent. I think it's important to learn about what it takes to be a parent, and there's many different parenting styles and lots of content out there about how to be a great parent, right? And how to grow and learn from your children. And so I do feel lots of pressure there. Like I want to be the best father that I can be for, my kid or my kids. And to get there, it's going to require lots of practice, it's going to require lots of learning, patience. And so when we talk about baby pressure, for me, that's part of the pressure or expectations I have for myself. And maybe to a larger extent, my family has for me. But really for me, I do take this decision very seriously because I do want to be the best parent figure. And I know that is not easy. I think that experience, we haven't had. We have tutored and mentored students, but being a parent, I think it's a whole different ball game of itself.
So you're saying that the baby pressure encompasses, age, the timeline that's set upon us, and also the fact that you should be a good parent. It's not only one source of pressure, it's like this bubble that has just all these different pressures added to it.
Yeah, and how do you say, hey, I'm prepared to be a parent? Like, I don't think there is maybe a moment where you'll feel 100% prepared. I think it's more of a decision you make, and along the way, you learn to become a great parent.
I think some of that pressure also comes from like ourselves, the way that we both grew up. I don't think parents can be perfect. With that said, I know that there were certain things in our childhood that we wish our parents did differently. And of course, our parents did their best with what they knew, with what they had in the times that they grew up. So we definitely sympathize with them being parents. They're human beings, right? They couldn't be parents 24/7.
Yeah.
But with that said, there's certain aspects of our life that we want to do differently for our kids. And with that, I've added that pressure sometimes on you of, like my dad wasn't always there. And so I definitely told you, that would be something great, that if you could be a great dad. I guess something that I want is for both of us to be good parents. And I've said this before, but hopefully not passing so much trauma to our kids.
Mm-hmm. That's a big one. Yeah.
And of course, that's impossible
Right.
because,
It's part of life, I guess.
I mean, we can prevent it as much as we can, but we're not going to be 100% perfect parents. Like, nobody is.
Yeah. And I think one of the hardest things is creating such a loving environment for your kid to grow and flourish. I think that's one of the things for me that I want to prioritize. Financial, stability is another one, right? I want to make sure that we're able to we're able to support them in any way possible, right? If they have a big dream, like we're going to be their number one supporters and kind of help them make that happen. And so there's a lot to becoming a parent, period. And it's a big life change, right? Our priorities will shift. Like you said, right now, I think we're focused on growing personally and achieving some of our own personal milestones and goals. Like travel is one of them, right?
Yeah.
But when you have a kid and you want to travel, there's many things that you have to consider. Same thing if you have a pet, right? If you're a mom or daddy for a dog or a cat, when you're traveling, there's lots of things you have to consider.
I'm not gonna lie, I think it is very scary to become a parent. And I don't know if this is how you view it, but I feel like once we have kids, like my life is no longer my life, and that's very scary for me. Because I don't know what that would be, and would I lose control of my life. And this is just like the way that I'm thinking as a person that has no kids right now. And it's just very scary for somebody to take over your life. Of course, you're gonna have so much joy, but then I get different stories from parents that I've met in the past is like, yes, it's a lot of love and joy, but then they always say you're never going to sleep again.
They're tired.
They always say you're always going to have to worry about somebody else for the rest of your life. And that's true because your kids are going to grow up and you're still going to be worried. They say you're not going to have any time. You're always going to be tired. So, yeah, I mean, that's scary.
Yeah, and one thing I will forever in my life be surprised about and grateful and amazed is how our parents raised us.
I know.
With no internet, or I mean if there was internet, but not as prominent as it is now, right? Like no Google Maps. Period. How did they get from like, hey, we're gonna go to Disneyland and Disneyland's 2 hours away? No worries.
Did you not get lost?
Yeah. How they figure that out, right?
Mom, how did you navigate the world?
Even coming to a different country, not speaking the language, coming to a new country, there's a lot of challenges that one may face. How they were able to do so much for us, that to me will always be, I guess, one of the greatest wonders of life.
Yeah.
And something that I cherish and I'm definitely grateful for.
Yeah.
But now, as kind of we think, if we want to have kids, there's a lot to consider when making that decision.
Does it not scare you though?
It does. It does. Like I said, I think, as a parent, you were talking about this. Your identity changes. Your priorities will shift. Or it may do that for some. And we have limited time. So knowing that, now that there's another amazing human being, with you, you want to make sure you try to prioritize most of your time with them, right? And so priorities do shift. Maybe now we have more free time, quote unquote, to go to the gym, to focus on work, 9 to 5, maybe some additional hours after, to maybe create a podcast, right? But that may not be the case when you have a kid. Your priorities will shift. More of our time will have to go towards us wanting to spend time with our kid and being present. And we're going to have to take away time from all of these other responsibilities or passions that we have. And so it is a change in identity. It is a change in how we prioritize things. Family, at least to me, I know family is going to come first. And so job is going to take a backseat and other things will take a backseat. Traveling will take a backseat. So there's a lot of change there. And change can be hard and challenging, but definitely for the right reasons.
I think as I'm getting close to 30, as you're getting closer to 30, I definitely feel the pressure. I feel it like a ticking clock, the countdown.
Yeah. Final countdown.
One of the things that really is on top of mind, I know that some people do have regrets of things that they didn't do when they were like single or before they became parents. That's something that I worry about. Am I making the best use of my time right now when I do have the time to do things that I want? I don't want to regret not doing things before we have kids. And I do feel like the constant time pressure, time anxiety that I mentioned is sometimes very present on my birthdays. And I don't want to be that person that feels anxious for getting older. But I think a very big part of the reason why I get anxious as my birthday approaches, as I'm turning a year older, is that, like that reproductive timeline. The way that I think about it, it's like, well, I have one more year left to live before my life is no longer mine. And before I completely change my identity, your body completely changes. Literally, who you are is just, you're no longer that person. And I know that new moms sometimes mourn the loss of their identity because now there's somebody completely different. I read this somewhere, but I don't think enough people talk about it. Becoming a mom is a beautiful thing, but at the same time, you're losing that identity of your childless self.
The other side of the coin is, yes, you will be able to travel. You will be able to do all these amazing things and build memories, but not with your kids.
Yeah.
So it does add life and it does time to your timeline when you have kids, in the sense that now this is going to be one more loving person that you can enjoy the world with, right? And I think one key topic or theme that we've been discussing in this podcast is loneliness. Feeling, alone in this big world, right? And I think when you have a kid, it does give you purpose. In this life, I think at the end of the day, we're looking for purpose. We're looking for something that gives us meaning. Part of becoming a parent is finding that purpose to try to create a loving and safe environment for your kid, and also be excited about their future and what they want to do. That's kind of the other side of the coin that I kind of wanted to share, is that when having a kid, there's also lots of positive things that come with it. And when making that decision, is that something that we also consider? There's pros and cons to having kids, but I think at the end of the day, it's still a deeply personal decision that requires a lot of consideration.
Although I feel the pressure to start having kids at 30,
there's no deadline.
There's no deadline.
Or there's no one size fits all approach as to when people should have kids.
Yeah.
To do an analogy, right? A lot of people say like success is linear. Do this, do this, do this, and then you'll be successful. But no, success is non-linear, right? There's a lot of many different opportunities and different permutations of what success looks like.
Sometimes it's overwhelming to think about all the things that we need to do to prepare. I'll feel more ready maybe in a couple years, but right now I definitely want to enjoy our time together, like cherish the relationship and build it and continue to grow it. Because I've heard that once you have kids, your relationship obviously takes like second place. And that can also be really difficult for folks. Getting back to the question of when people ask us when we're going to have kids, sometimes I find it a little bit annoying. But I know that for some people, that question can be really hurtful because not everybody can have kids. And when people add that constant pressure, it can really hurt some couples. And there are a lot of really valid reasons for why people don't want to have kids.
Yeah, and people should respect that.
For example, it's a significant lifestyle change, and some people may not want to give up that freedom or flexibility that they currently have in their lives.
Another one could be career considerations. If you decide to start a family and have kids, it can impact your career progression, as you may need to or may want to take some time off. Sometimes people do decide to prioritize their professional goals over having children, and that's completely okay. Another one is financial considerations. As we have already mentioned, having a kid can cost hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars. That's what a lot of projections show. And some people may not feel financially secure to take on that responsibility. Yeah. Even for us, we both work, but I feel that there's lots more we can do or we need to do to make sure that we're stable and we can provide the best environment possible for our kid or kids.
I mean, this is a huge one, right? Financial stability. Having the funds to feel like you are going to give your kid the best possible life. I know that parents want the best for their kids. And so this is a very real and valid, totally valid. All reasons are valid, but I feel like this one hits close to home because, growing up, my family didn't have a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
We definitely struggled a lot. And I was very aware of all these financial issues that we were dealing with. And I just remember it being very stressful.
Mm-hmm. And you want your kid to grow in a less stressful, less traumatic environment than we had, right? You want the
Mm-hmm.
best for them. And that's why we take into consideration all these factors when making that decision.
Having a kid and growing a kid is very expensive.
Mm-hmm.
So,
One more thing would be environmental concerns, right? Some people may choose not to have kids due to concerns about overpopulation or the impact that this can have on the environment. Climate change is real, global warming is real, right? And so then that is another reason why people may decide to not have kids.
another reason why people don't have kids is due to trauma or past experiences. For some people, past experiences such as abuse, neglect, or difficult family dynamics can impact the decision to have kids.
And some folks may already have lots of responsibilities, like taking care of their parents, taking care of their relatives, right? So adding on to that list of additional folks they need to take care of, for them may be very overwhelming. And so that may be another reason why someone may decide not to have kids.
Some people may not feel that their current relationship is stable enough to support having kids. So that could be another reason.
Yeah, it could also be that maybe you want to have kids, but your partner doesn't want to have kids, or
Mm-hmm.
vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really important that when making the decision, you're both aligned.
And another reason that I wanted to emphasize as a very valid reason why people don't have kids is that some people may be struggling with infertility
Mm-hmm.
or have medical conditions that make it really difficult or unsafe to have children.
Mm-hmm.
If people do share their struggles with infertility with you, it's important to be empathetic and offer support.
Have compassion and be supportive.
Infertility can be a very difficult and emotional journey, and it's important to be sensitive to people's feelings around this topic.
And not assume that everyone can have kids.
And people don't feel comfortable sharing this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
That's why we wanted to discuss this topic, right? When you see a couple and you ask them, like, hey, when are you going to have kids? When am I going to see babies running around the house? Like, there's a lot in a relationship that you don't know about, a lot that's going on with somebody's life. And that can be a very hurtful question, because how do you not know that these two people are trying to conceive and they can't, or that they're struggling with infertility? And so that question can be very triggering and remind them of all these things that they're dealing with and societal expectation and pressure. So, let's all try to be a little more mindful and consider that there are a lot of reasons why somebody can't have kids or don't want to have kids, and to respect that.
People today are less willing to maybe ask you about your salary and your compensation, how much you make, but yet they're more willing to ask you about if you want to have babies or not. I think maybe instead of asking folks if they want to have kids, there's many other topics you can have a conversation around. And we'll give you a few quick topics, maybe if it helps folks who are listening. You can ask questions like, is there anything new in your lives? What are your plans for the future? It's more broad and open-ended.
Definitely, those are great ways, open ended questions to ask. And if people do happen to ask when you're going to have kids, or here are some examples on how to respond that we've gathered. If you are uncomfortable discussing your plans for having children, or you simply don't want to have kids, it's important to remember that you are not obligated to explain your choices to anyone. However, if you do want to answer, here are some ways that you can answer that question. You can politely redirect the conversation by saying something like, thanks for asking, but we're just enjoying our time together right now. Have you been up to anything fun lately? You can also be honest. If you're comfortable sharing, you can say, we've decided not to have kids, or actually, we've decided that we're not planning on having kids. It's just not something that's right for us. Or we're still deciding if having kids is the right thing for us. You can also change the subject by saying, oh, well, we're still figuring that out. By the way, have you seen any good movies lately? And you can also respond to this question by working on setting boundaries. This is one that I'm still working on. Setting boundaries with family is not always the easiest, but if someone is asking about your plans for having kids in a way that feels intrusive or uncomfortable, it's totally and completely okay for you to set your boundaries. You could say something like, I appreciate your interest, but we prefer to keep our plans for having kids private.
Ultimately, the most important thing is to do what feels right for you and your partner, whether that means sharing your plans openly or setting boundaries around the topic. Reproductive choices are personal and nobody else's business.
That's right. Nobody else's business. Okay, so I want to share one last story.
Story time.
So one day, my dad and I were driving to a restaurant, and I casually brought up the conversation of kids. I said, Dad, like nowadays, I think I brought it up because he asked me if we were planning to have kids and when that was going to happen. And I told him, Dad, like people nowadays don't want to have kids, at least as many as they did back then. A lot of my friends don't want to have kids, and that's like completely fine. And I think we're still deciding and figuring that out for ourselves. The way that he reacted, he actually got a little bit mad when I said that we didn't know we were gonna have kids. He said, like, what do you mean you're not gonna have kids? And I was like, we're still considering, we're still thinking about it. And he's like, no. Like, what do you mean you're not gonna have kids? Like, you have to have kids. And I was like shocked. Yeah. I said, what if we don't want to have kids? That's just our decision. He's like, no, like you have to have kids. Like, you have a career, you have a job, you're financially good. So why wouldn't you have a kid? And I think he compared it to himself at our age. So he's like, when I was your age, I was worse off than you. So if you're better off than me, what's the reason for not having kids? There's no excuse for not having kids. And I was so mad. And I just did it to kind of spite him because it really bothered me that he was getting mad at the fact that I didn't want to have kids or at the possibility. It's not that we don't want to have kids. It was just that even the possibility of us not wanting to have kids was so outrageous to him that he got mad. And I was like, what? Like, this is such a disturbing reaction to me. So I was like, well, at the end of the day, it's not really your choice. Like, if we decide to have kids or not, like, that's on us.
Yeah, and especially coming from your dad, right? As a parent, you expect your parents to be supportive and regardless of what decision you decide to make, they should be there to have your back. And I agree with you. I mean, I would be as shocked as well if my parents had this strong desire to have kids and they would see it as wrong if we decided not to have kids. That's why for us, is the role of a parent is very important, and we want to be very supportive with our kids.
We just couldn't even fathom the possibility of us not wanting kids. I guess to some people, that idea is very foreign. And so what made me upset is like, why would you get mad at that decision? It's not your body. It's like, it's my choice. I'm going to be the one that's having to carry this baby. It's just so upsetting to me that he would get mad at a choice that he has no control or power over. It's like a very personal decision between both of us. It's my body. If I decide not to have a kid, even if you wanted to have a kid, like nobody can force me. So it was just so upsetting to me that he said that he reacted in that way.
Maybe the other argument that folks may make is, oh, you're selfish because you don't want to have kids, right? And just to clarify, it's completely okay to not have kids, and it's not an act of selfishness.
You're so right. Like, I think he made me feel selfish in that moment because he's like, you have all the resources here in the US. You have a partner, you have a job. Why in the world would you not have kids?
It's a very inconsiderate viewpoint that maybe your dad may have or had at that point. Because what if the answer would have been, well, you may be thinking of taking care about them, right? That, there's health involved, time, finances that you would like to dedicate maybe to helping your parents or helping that loved one or relative who is asking you this question. But then, no, the expectation is, by when are you going to have kids?
Yeah, right? I think that's right. They don't consider everything that we want to do for our future. To close this episode, we want to say that at the end of the day, having kids or not having kids is your decision. If you want to have kids, great. If you don't, that's great as well. It's important to not let societal expectations, pressure, and family expectation dictate our personal choices, and also respect people's bodies. Again, if you're not going to be the one carrying the baby, you have no say in the matter.
And it's important to know that we all have different circumstances in life. And the decision to have children is one that is deeply personal And again, there is no one size fits all approach to living a satisfying and happy life. I do want to emphasize that it is perfectly acceptable for folks to choose a path that differs from societal expectations, and to place their well being and happiness ahead of external pressures is completely okay.
That's right. It's our lives, and we should be able to make our own decisions without feeling like we have to justify them to anyone else. Thank you so much for listening, for hearing our experiences. We hope you make the decision that feels right for you and makes you the happiest. We send you so much love, and we support whatever decision you want to make in your life.
And once again, whether to have a kid or not, that's a decision that should be made by the couple themselves.
One last point before we go, that I wanted to touch upon. You don't need to be in a relationship or be in a couple to be a parent, if that's something you decide to do. Nowadays, I know we kept on saying like the decision is up to the couple, but the decision is up to the person.
Yes.
Right? There's
100%.
a lot of different ways to become a parent now.
Yeah.
You can adopt, you can do in vitro fertilization, you can try all these different ways. But if you want to become a parent, you don't need to be in a relationship, you don't need to be in a couple, and that's totally okay.
Yeah, the decision is yours at the end of the day. And if you're a family member or friend and you know someone who just got engaged or got married recently
or wants to become a parent,
please, please, please be supportive.
And be thoughtful and sympathize and just be mindful in the questions that you ask.
Yeah, last episode was about affirmations. Share affirmations with that person. Be there for them and have their back. This is a really big decision in life. And let them know that you love them, that you care for them, and that you support them regardless of whether or not they want to have kids.
Live your life however you want to. Although maybe the pressure can be really strong sometimes from society or from family, because I've definitely felt it. We hope that you can just do whatever makes you happy and cut out a lot of that pressure from your life. And that's all we wish for you.
Like we always do, we'd end the episode with La vida es una.
La vida es una. Enjoy it to the fullest. Live your life however you want. And we support you. And we just want you to be happy.
Yeah, la vida es una. So enjoy it, disfrútala, y tú decides lo que quieres hacer con tu vida.
We wish you all the happiness in the world.
Con cariño,
Itzel
y Dante.
Thank you for listening, and we'll see you in our next episode.
If you like this episode, don't forget to follow us wherever you listen to podcasts so you don't miss out on new episodes. If you have a few minutes, it would mean a lot to us if you left us a review, as this will help us reach more people. You can follow us on Instagram or TikTok at La Vida es una Pod. And thank you so much for tuning in. We'll see you in the next episode.
Hasta la próxima, mi gente.
Whew, that was a great one.